Is there something to size? In any case, there is no harm in having a big political unit through the political integration, where possible, to conclude, where possible. To conclude this short statement, we need to answer the following questions. These are, if we do not create a big market, how do we intend to encourage and support the wealth creators in the respective countries? If we do not create a big and reliable market for our wealth creators, how do businesses expand to produce more products, create more jobs, and pay more taxes? The answer is, if we are not able, no, the other question is, if you are not able to operate in the four spheres, land, air, sea, and space, how do we hope to guarantee our strategic security? Somebody is on the moon looking at you, you don't see him, how do you protect yourself? The ancient area of Africa, East Africa, given the potential to unite all our people around Swahili language, has the capacity to create prosperity and also ensure the strategic security of the black race. Historically speaking, if we use the dedication to the four historical missions, we discover that the patriots that fulfilled their mandate were Mwalimu Nyerere, Sheikh Aman Abed Karume, Sekou Toure, Nkrumah and Modibo Keita. Of these efforts, it's only Tanzania that has sustained the success of economic and political integration. We must salute Tanzania. They are a shining example. Even the struggle for Uhuru liberation was not easy because we had collaborators. However, mainly because of the combination of the African resistance, ANC of South Africa, the Mau Mau in Kenya, etc., the global anti-colonial movement in Asia and Latin America, the emergence of the socialist camp following the victories of the communists in Russia and China, and the imperialists weakening themselves with their inter-imperialist wars of 1914, 1918, 1939, 1945. By 1963, a total of 36 countries had got independence in Africa. There was, however, another 20 or so where the imperialists were determined not to surrender. These were Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, Namibia, etc. Some of the countries were on the road to independence, e.g. Kenya and Zambia, but not the others. Literal Portugal was saying that Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, etc. were not colonies, but overseas provinces of Portugal. In quotes, imagine, literal Portugal was saying that Mozambique is an overseas province of Portugal. And that the black Africans can become black Portuguese assimilados by forgetting their culture. While at the OAU conference of 1963 in Addis Ababa, Africa had declared that the whole Africa must be free either by peace or by war, it was only a few countries led by Tanzania under the leadership of Mwalimu that really stood by the freedom fighters. Others were Zambia, Botswana, Guinea-Conakry, Algeria, Ghana under Nkrumah, and Egypt under Nasser. On account of the resistance movements, support of these Pan-Africanists, the socialist countries, and some democratic groups in the West, by 1994, the whole of Africa was free with the majority ruling South Africa. So by 1994, we had spent a whole century trying to liberate Africa from these invaders. And the last country to be free was South Africa in 1994. I'm glad to say that although the revolutionaries in Uganda arrived on the scene late, from 1989, we were able to give serious support to the ANC of South Africa and the PSC in the form of military training, logistics, educational opportunities, etc. Africa had therefore as the century of shame for African continent, where the whole of it had been colonized and a half a millennium of plunder by the European and Arabs with the slave trade come to an end, become free. Africa had become free. Uhuru, freedom had come. The question was, where is Umoja? Because you remember, it was Uhuru na Umoja. Uhuru came. Now the question was, where is Umoja? Umoja, for economic prosperity, through economic integration, in order to create big markets to support the efforts of the African wealth creators, and Umoja for political integration, where possible, to create strategic security for the black race on land, in the air, at sea, and in space. Yes, some of the efforts for economic integration have moved. I worked with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, Mzee Mkapa to revive the East African community. You remember this community had broken up. So when we came into government, immediately we started working with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, later on Mkapa. We brought it back, 1999. I salute Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for joining the East African community. Let us fully implement the charter of the East African community and the roadmap, as His Excellency Mr. President Ruto was reporting. How about COMESA and the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area? Some actors seem to treat this integration as optional. In my view, I have always heard that it is mandatory to unite or risk perpetual marginalization. How about political integration? In the case of East Africa, we the Pan-Africanists have never relented. Ever since the student days in the 1960s, we have been struggling for that integration, supporting our elder Pan-Africanists, Mwalimu Nyerere, Abeid Karume, Kenneth Kaunda, Arap Moi, etc. With Mzee Kibaki, Mzee Mkapa, President Kagame, President Nkurunziza, we called for the fast tracking of the federation in the year 2014. However, on account of the awkwardness of the African Revolution, seeing what is happening in much of Africa, instead of Uhuru na Umoja, in many countries, in many areas, we have got Uhuru na Uhasama. Is it Uhasama?
Uhasama is correct.
Discord.
Discord.
Yeah. Mnaona Kiswahili changu? Msinichezee. So instead of Uhuru na Umoja, we have Uhuru na Uhasama, freedom and discord. In Uganda, we have a Uganda proverb. It goes like this. Ekitata muhima tekimumala konte. In English, it means that if a muhima, one of the tribes in Uganda, does not die, even if he loses cattle, on account of his dedication to cattle keeping, he will do everything possible to get new cattle. Africa is still there. Although we have lost opportunities, but we can catch up. What is the consequence of Uhuru na Uhasama? Uhuru na Uhasama instead of Uhuru na Umoja. Economic stagnation and the suffering of the populations. What is generating the migration of the African youth that are dying in the Mediterranean Sea going to Europe? It is the narrowness of the money economy of Africa that does not create necessary jobs. One of the consequences of not fully integrating our markets, investors get frustrated when they cannot export within even the East African community. The GDP of Africa today, the GDP of the whole of Africa is US dollars 3.6 trillion. the whole of Africa, Africa yote, the GDP is 3.6 trillion. That of the USA is US dollars 31.82 trillion. The GDP of USA is bigger than the one of Africa, more than 10 times. China is now 20.6 trillion. India is US dollars 4.18 trillion. Even little South Korea has got a GDP of US dollars 1.86 trillion. One may ask, why does the little South Korea have the that GDP size? One factor is that South Korea, because of the Cold War politics, benefited a lot from the USA market. However, in our Luganda language we say, omuggo oguli ku muliraano teggobango. The stick in the neighbor's house will not help you to scare away the leopard. If the leopard comes to attack you, you are not going to say, I get a stick from the neighbor to chase the leopard. You must have your own stick in your own house. You need your own stick in your own house. You have seen Mr. Trump recently threatening tariffs on South Korea and others. The question we need to ask is, does size of the domestic market matter in terms of attracting investments, domestic or foreign? Because we have got economists, professors, what have you, they are very, very, but I think the size of the market matters. The size of your market matters. Why? China opened up its economy in 1978, when many of the African countries were already under the pastoralism of the World Bank and the IMF, were already investing, implementing structural adjustment, all those things, etc. The Chinese are still communists. Chinese are communists. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Yet the economy has attracted US dollars 2.7 trillion from outside since 1978. While the whole of Africa has attracted US dollars 1.8 trillion. The GDP of China in 1978 was US dollars 149 billion. 149 billion, that's what it was in 1978, the GDP of China. It is now US dollars 20.6 trillion. India opened up in the year 1991. Since that time, it has attracted US dollars 1.2 trillion in foreign investments. By that time, the GDP of India was US dollars 270 billion, small. India's GDP is now US dollars 4.18 trillion. The three richest countries in the world today are all big countries, big land mass and big population. While we look for foreign markets, the reliable core market is the internal one. It is guaranteed. The richest countries are the USA, China, and India. I appeal to the youth of East Africa, to go back to Uhuru na Umoja. Recently, I met some Gen Z from Kenya. They came to Uganda, that they are experts in organizing riots. And they had come to Uganda to give technical support. to the Ugandan Gen Z, how to riot. But some among the Ugandans said, but you people, why don't we go and see this old man? So these children came. The ones from Uganda and from Kenya, they came. So we are experts in riots. I said, okay, I can join you. But what are we rioting for? They said corruption, what? I said, okay, but even if there was no corruption, if you don't address the issues of structure, if you have got a small market, even if there is no corruption, how will the economy expand? So I said, why don't you go and talk about East African issues? So I told His Excellency, I am here with your Gen Z. So I gave them some transport and they went back.